as we prepare to close the book on the trash fire that was 2021, I thought to myself, you know what, why don't we do a special episode? Because on Any Good normally I only get to review the big movies, the blockbusters. And believe it or not, I'm no Philistine. I actually see some films that aren't put out by Marvel, that don't have superheroes in it, if you can imagine such a thing exists. And that's why I thought to myself, you know, over the next couple of days, I'll probably put out the best of 2021. So why not until then put out the rest of 2021? Films I saw this year that I haven't had a chance to talk about and won't make my top 10, although some came pretty damn close. So that's what we're going to do. This is Any Good, the rest of 2021. And I think I know just how to get us started. Candyman, 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 Candyman. I knew it was bullshit.
If you're out here looking for Candyman, you ask me, stay away.
Talk about a film that just sort of came and went, which I thought was a real shame because I actually quite enjoyed Candyman, and I will dare I say I enjoyed it more than the original. Now again, I'd only seen the original for the first time this year. Maybe it will grow on me in the years to come, but I just thought it was very interesting, and I liked they explored I liked how they incorporated a lot of themes and ideas, the idea of gentrification and race relations in America and police brutality. And because of that, I feel like it stayed true to what Candyman was, because those themes are certainly there, maybe a bit more implicitly in the original film. And because of that, I think it was just a film that it made sense to bring back, given where we are in the world right now. And at the same time, I do acknowledge that maybe it didn't expand or explore on those themes all that well. But it's a short film, I guess, and you can only do so much with it. But then again, if you're going to a film called Candyman, expecting some kind of essay on race relations in the 21st century, maybe you've gone wrong somewhere. But I at least have to give it a pat on the back for trying. At the same point, I did find a lot of things that really worked in the film, and one of those was the cast. I thought Teyonah Parris and Yahya Abdul-Mateen were excellent in the film. I loved their chemistry. They were just a believable and interesting couple, and because of that, it really hurt watching them go through this. A lot of people are going to be disappointed that Tony Todd wasn't in it all that much. I could certainly see that complaint. Certainly if it was a franchise I had a bit more of an affinity towards, I would definitely take that a bit more. I do think other people are going to complain that it's not all that scary, and that's certainly the case, but I found it had a very good style, and I thought nothing else, it was very, visually interesting and at times unsettling. And I think because of that, I'm interested to see what Nia DaCosta ends up doing with the Marvels in 2023, I think it is. But I guess it just didn't really work for a lot of people. So good chances this is the only one we're going to get, I suppose, in this rebooted series, which is a shame. But for what we got, I quite enjoyed it. I would certainly enjoyed it more than the next two horror films I'm going to talk about.
You should say it.
Candyman.
Say his name.
Candyman! I'm seeing things. I'm seeing murders as they're happening.
Some people really loved this film, and I honestly just do not get it. I was so bored by this film. I thought it was slow. It was like an hour-long film dragged into 2 hours. And it was so badly acted, and the dialogue was terrible, and visually it looked like a horror film made for a Hallmark channel for television. I was genuinely falling asleep watching this movie. But then, the last 20 minutes happen. And I'm going to spoil this because honestly, if I don't talk about spoilers here, I have nothing else to say on this film. So if you don't want to see those, skip to this time code. 3, 2, 1. As it turns out, at the start of the film, we see someone getting operated on. They have a tumor that is malignant. And to get rid of this tumor, apparently the doctors just opened up the head, got the tumor and just shoved it back into her head. Which is like, seems kind of lazy, but sure. Which is bad enough. But as it turns out, our lead character is the killer, dun dun dun, which is kind of actually obvious as you watch the film. But why you might not have suspected it is because the killer moves very erratically and looks very different. And the reason they look very different is because when she does the murders, she doesn't remember them because of the tumor. And the tumor pops out the back of her head and she starts walking backwards, moving strangely, climbing walls, things that don't make any sense logically at all. And it's so bad, it's amazing. It's hilarious, it's stupid, it's so dumb. but it's pretty funny and interesting and genuinely entertaining. Now, I will say, was not enough to save the film for me. It was for some people, so I guess check the film out and see if you get enough out of it yourself. Although, then again, now that you know the twist, it might not be worth it. I also just have to tip my hat to James Wan, who came off a $1 billion movie and made this film, which feels like an elaborate prank on somebody. Then again, I didn't have high hopes for this film. I wouldn't go in with any expectations, and because of that, whatever. Maybe my biggest disappointment of the year was Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho.
You witnessed the murder last night, but you believe this was a vision from the past.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of his. I've loved all of his films to this point, and props to the guy for trying something new, because he made a horror film, but it just didn't work for me. Now, I do want to go into the positives first, because honestly, there were a lot, and there's a lot that works in this film. It just, for me, it wasn't a miss, but it wasn't a hit either. I mean, the performances in the film in general were great, but of course, the two leads, Anna Taylor-Joy and Thomasin McKenzie, they just nailed their roles, and I thought they were fantastic, along with the late, great Diana Rigg, who was way more integral to the film than I expected. The soundtrack, as you would expect from Edgar Wright, was excellent, and visually, it was a fantastic film. I mean, it just felt like he was having a ball here. With some of the visuals and some of the effects. It was just a really good looking film. So it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint exactly where the train came off the tracks for me, to be honest. It just kind of felt like it lost me along the way, but I was on board at the start. It was started really strong. And maybe, I know it's a very pointed homage to the giallo genre of films, and maybe my relative unfamiliarity with the genre kind of alienated me, but I don't think so. I just, in general, felt very, very uneven. The movie was trying to be kind of topical and tie in themes and ideas about, consent and the kind of the Me Too movement, I suppose. But it was just really messy and poorly handled, in my opinion. And because of that, it just dissolves into a sort of a mystery film that isn't all that captivating. And at times, given its themes and ideas, it was just far too forgiving of some of its characters, in my opinion, even the bad ones. And because of that, it just felt really unearned. It felt like the film wanted a happy and a clean ending, but hadn't built towards that at all. And because of that, it just kind of, towards the end, became a bit of a jumbled mess. It tried to do something that it felt kind of impossible to pull off, given what I was building to until now. And because of that, I was really disappointed in Edgar Wright's latest film. But I did have a bit more success with his other film this year.
They've reinvented themselves several times.
The thing that marked them was their unwillingness to give up.
There's an old saying that a good comedian can make the phone book funny, and I've always felt the same thing with a filmmaker. A good filmmaker can make a documentary on a subject that you're either unaware of or uninterested in, and find a way of making it good, and that was certainly the case with the Sparks brothers. I've never heard of Sparks until I heard Edgar Wright was making a documentary on them. But I'm a big fan of Edgar Wright, so I was like, well, let's see how this is going to go. And I was worried that it was just him, indulging his own interests as opposed to challenging himself as a filmmaker. I was wondering, was this going to be like, when Martin Scorsese just out of nowhere is like, I'm going to make a documentary on the Rolling Stones. I don't know if that's what he sounds like, but it's kind of thing of like, I like the Rolling Stones, I'm going to make a documentary on the Rolling Stones. If you like Rolling Stones, maybe you like this, otherwise, who cares? And I was pleasantly surprised. Thankfully, I was wrong. I enjoyed the hell out of this documentary because you could kind of feel his love and enthusiasm for the duo just throughout the whole film. And I think his kind of frenetic energy and editing style really lent itself to the documentary to keep it engaging and to keep it fun. It was also helped that Sparks has a career that is just very diverse and long and fascinating to watch, and they're very charismatic as well. It just felt like a perfect match between Edgar Wright and Sparks, that they were working together. It just really helped the presentation of the films. It was one of the most visually interesting documentaries I've ever seen. It was just so well handled. I also thought there was a lot of talking head interviews in the film that were just fascinating and very well utilized, and honestly shocking some of the people they got to be interviewed in this documentary. Even some of big names that are in it for 5 seconds, and you're like, oh well, there they go, wow. I guess if you were to take, a few points of criticism towards the film, I would probably say that it did feel like Edgar Wright was more invested when he was talking about, the years where he probably was a massive Sparks fan, like the middle portion of their career when he was growing up. It feels like that was where a lot of his enthusiasm was, where maybe in the more recent and the later years, it felt like his interest or enthusiasm kind of waned a bit. It was still okay. I also suppose you could take points away for, you know, the film not having a kind of a pointed approach to the duo. It was literally just, here's their whole career. It was a kitchen sink method, which, you know, it's a band that people don't necessarily know. So I felt like there could have been a more interesting approach to that, possibly. And also it was perhaps a bit long. But those are all minor criticisms. I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. Enough so that I've bought a ticket to see Sparks on their latest tour. So that should tell you all you need to know about the Sparks Brothers. And at least with this one, I can explain what I liked about the film, which I can't really do with the next documentary film I'm on about.
But I'm not just defined by what you see. I'm also defined by all the things you will never see.
And now for the worst review I'll ever do, because this is a film where I don't think I can explain it. I'm not sure what I can actually say about it. I'm actually not sure it's a film. I said it's a documentary. I don't think it's not a documentary. I don't know, is it not? I don't think it's a documentary. It's like more of it's like a film stage show, okay, by this magician and performance artist called Derek Delgadio. And I will say I always appreciate when I watch something, and I can honestly say I've never seen anything like it before, because it happens so rarely. But this is genuinely one of those times. Like, I guess there's a running theme throughout the show, but I don't really want to say that either. But I think what's magic about this is that you should just watch it knowing very little about it, because he's such a good storyteller, this Derek Delgadio guy. And I mean, I guess like the biggest endorsement I can give this is that I put it on sort of in the background while I was doing something, and by the end I was on, you know, the edge of my seat, the tip of my toes, like just giving my full attention. I'd thrown everything to the side and I had 100% of my attention. It was something that to me was just a really interesting watch. It was an experience, one that I would absolutely recommend, and you should definitely check out. One I can't recommend as much though is Deadly Cuts.
With the gang escalate, we're knocking down the shops.
Dino's everybody's trouble.
So this is like an Irish film. I see as many Irish films as I can. You know, I like to support the local Irish film industry, but I feel like whenever an Irish film comes out, the Irish media is very quick to give it a pat on the back. Like, you made a film, as opposed to, is it a good film? And this was a real disappointment to me, because when I saw the premise, I was like, that's excellent. And the premise was hairdressers take on a local gang. But it seems like that's how they got people in the circus tent, and the film wasn't really sure of what it wanted to be. It feels like half of it was about, you know, a black comedy about hairdressers having to get rid of bodies and such, and the other one was like, hey, we're going to enter a hairdressing competition to get back the salon. And it's like one or the other. There was just a lot of unfocused themes and ideas in this film that were really obvious and kind of badly handled. It was just very unfocused. Like, there was a lot of themes of class and that kind of thing. It feels like it wanted to do everything, but it didn't do anything particularly well as a result. It all just felt very, very obvious. And for me, the biggest problem is that if you're doing like a dark comedy, or a comedy in general, make it funny. But for me, it sacrificed a lot of the darker, more serious, dramatic elements for humor that was like the lowest common denominator. Like, for example, there's a scene where they're getting rid of a body, and you're like, oh, this is like where we get the serious stakes of the film down, that this is serious. Leave this scene like standalone now. Nope. What do? They're getting rid of the body, it's all somber, and somebody farts. And that's meant to be funny. I'm like, all you've done there is say, like, the characters are laughing now because they don't take it seriously. So, you know, if they don't take the stakes of the film seriously, why should we? It wasn't funny enough to be a good comedy. It wasn't dramatic enough to be a good drama. So for me, it was just a bit of a shambles. I know other people enjoy it, so I guess check it out and figure it out for yourself. And I will say, I thought the cast was very good. I did like the ending. But it just feels like a movie that, had it been executed better, we could have had a much more superior film. So another Irish film I saw this year was The Boys from County Hell.
I saw something weird. Whose foot's that? Fuck this, I'm out!
This is another movie where I was left maybe a little bit disappointed. Not as much as Deadly Cuts. I thought this was far superior to that. But it's another one that's, you know, kind of mixing comedy with another genre. It's horror comedy in this case. But I have to say again, I found the comedy to be very lacking. A lot of the humour was like Irish humour, in my opinion, which again, if it's not working on me, an Irish person, I don't know how it's going to work with an international audience. But what is strange then is that I feel like as much as it under-delivered comedy, it over-delivered in the horror elements, because the threat of the film is vampires, which is obviously way overplayed and done to death. But I think they managed to add enough kind of things to make it feel fresh, while also being respectful to vampire lore and the Dracula mythos, and also added a lot of cool touches to make it suitable for an Irish setting. I thought that was really well handled. Now, I will also say, I don't know what the budget for this film was, but they made the absolute best of their budget, and the effects, the makeup, the cinematography all surpassed my expectations. I just feel like it was let down by that one kind of regard. Had it been that they maybe, balanced horror and comedy a bit better, maybe if they sharpened the humour or focused a bit more on the horror, I think it would have been a far better film. But for what we got, it was a bit disappointing, but still definitely worth a watch. If we're talking about the best looking films of the year, I think we have to talk about The Green Knight.
1 year hence.
I was really excited for this movie based on the trailers alone. I just promised this gorgeous fantasy epic, and I think it certainly delivered on that. It was also a lot stranger and weirder than expected, which I think threw a few people off, including myself, as I'll get to in a sec. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It was exactly what it promised, which is a kind of a dark fantasy film made by A24. So, I don't know what I expected, but it was quite strange. It took me a while to figure out where I landed on it, and I think where I landed was that it was this, excellent film. Certainly visually, it had some fearless performances. It managed to be unsettling and upsetting when it needed to. I do want to see it again, so I can kind of make my mind up for sure, but I think given maybe a bit more time and a few more viewings, it certainly would probably squeak into my top 10 for 2021. Another film that came very close to my top 10 for this year was Dune.
We are a house of Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray.
I mean, if we're talking about epic films this year, we can't not talk about this movie. Some people absolutely loved this film, and we all thought it was going to bomb. It turned out to be a bit of a hit, and while a lot of people were talking about this like it was the second coming, I just kind of really liked it as opposed to loving it. I don't think it's as good as Denis Villeneuve's other films, but I do think it makes up for that with its size and scale, because it undoubtedly just feels like a massive film. But unlike a lot of other blockbusters or big films, it felt like it had a creative voice behind it, which often isn't the case. I mean, the only thing I would say bigger than the scale of the film is the balls of calling it Dune, and then when you sit down, it's Dune Part 1. Yeah, that was really presumptive. Way to wait until we're sitting down to be like, oh, it's a Part 1. And I think that is the biggest criticism towards it, is that it definitely feels very much like a Part 1. And because of that, it isn't altogether satisfying. The story isn't really up to much. It more feels like an introduction to the world. And, I'd say I'm, somewhat familiar with the world of Dune. But I wonder if you had no familiarity with Dune, would it work as well for you? But certainly I think the biggest compliment I can give it is that as much as this was a lot of world building, I was very interested and engrossed in the world that they showed off here. Even if the movie felt maybe a little bit long and indulgent, I think you could have trimmed bits of this movie a little bit. I will say, aside from that, some of the positives, the cast were great. There was Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she did a fantastic job. Timothy Chalamet made for a great lead. Oscar Isaac and Josh Brolin were excellent. Tip of the hat to whoever told Jason Momoa, just go out there and be Jason Momoa, because he was really good in that role. The score was fantastic. I really liked the effects. It just looked and felt massive and was very entertaining for that. And I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said already, except I'm down for as many installments of this as they are going to make. And while this one wasn't altogether satisfying, I think it certainly set the table for some very interesting future installments. I mean, if we're talking about big movies, I guess I should talk about some of the blockbusters I missed this year, like Free Guy.
I know this world is just a game, but this place, these people, that's all I have.
I was going to review this on Any Good, and then I actually realised I had not a lot to say on it. And I saw this at a surprise screening early. I'm not that early. I'm not there yet. And I saw people loving this film. And it just made me wonder, like, is that where the bar is now? That we just was the bar so low this year that we let this film pass? Because this was so uninteresting to me. It was exactly what I expected it from the trailers. Ryan Reynolds plays Ryan Reynolds, which is really starting to wear thin. He's just doing Deadpool now, constantly, apparently. I love Taika Waititi, but he was so cringy and unfunny in this. And I don't know, it felt like a non-gamer's idea of what video games are, you know? And that'd be fine. But the big problem for me was that it didn't really seem like it knew what it wanted to do, whether it wanted to poke fun at video games or whether it wanted to kind of praise video games and celebrate video games. And I'm not saying I expected any real commentary on the video game industry from this film, of course I didn't. But I just didn't really know what it wanted to be. It also feels like it actually established some rules of its world and then broke them, which I'm not going to get into because it would be a spoiler, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about if you're paying attention. And the big problem for me was just how formulaic and predictable the film was. There was no moment where it zigged when it was meant to zag, you know? It just felt like it stuck on the route it was meant to and never had any moment to surprise me. I didn't find it very funny at all. I guess what's becoming very clear along this list is that I'm a tough crowd for comedy, apparently. But, I mean, if the comedy doesn't hit, that'd be fine. But I was hoping the action and the chase sequences would, and they didn't. They just felt very artificial. And I know it's a video game, but they presented it like it looked like real life. It just looked very artificial and was uninteresting. It felt weightless, and because of that, it was hard to get invested in the action scenes or the threat of the movie. And aside from maybe the odds prize cameo, there was very little that actually amused me about this film. And given like the resources and the budget and the potential they had with an original film here, it just felt like they wasted it. And also, unfortunately, I think they wasted my time too. Speaking of actors who only play themselves, what did The Rock get up to this year?
My name is Dr. Lily Houghton. My brother and I are looking for passage upriver.
What's out there in the jungle? It's not a fun vacation.
This is one of those movies that I had very low expectations, if no expectations for. And I'm sure that certainly helped it. A lot of people kind of compare this to The Mummy and Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, The Mummy because it was this kind of period supernatural action film. And Pirates of the Caribbean because, you know, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's also supernatural and it's, of course, based on a theme park ride. And I think for what we got like a little fun adventure film. I do think those comparisons are pretty appropriate. And it surprised me. And granted, that was probably because I had pretty low expectations, but I thought the performances were entertaining. I liked the chemistry between The Rock and Emily Blunt. I thought they got on very well. And yeah, like it was a pretty disposable blockbuster, but it also felt like a fun film you might watch with the whole family and just enjoy for what it is. It's not going to change the world, but, you know, I thought there was some interesting ideas and, you know, a few decent twists in there and some progression that I was surprised at. If you had your brain turned off, which I most certainly did watching this film. And yeah, it was a bit bloated as well, and considering it's 2 hours, that's definitely a knock against it. But for what it was, maybe it was a low expectations, but Jungle Cruise I thought was pretty enjoyable, if not entirely memorable.